What's up, guys? Today's deck tech is not a pre-con upgrade. It's actually my favorite EDH deck of all time. We are going to be taking a look at Magda, Brazen Outlaw. So what is this deck all about? Well, Magda lends itself to a lot of strategies. You can take it in a Dwarven tribal route if you want to go pretty low power. Vehicles are also an excellent option, or there is always combo. Now, the deck I ended up making does have an ultimate win combo. However, it's not necessarily the main win condition of the deck. Yes, you can combo off, create infinite treasures, tutor out all your dragons and powerful artifacts and win the game. And that's definitely a viable strategy to go with this deck. However, it also can play at lower power tiers by just choosing not to use that combo. In fact, I found this deck to be very versatile and be able to play in a lot of different groups just based on choosing whether or not to go for the combo. Turns out, bringing out really powerful artifacts and dragons tends to be pretty good no matter what power level you're playing. Now, before we get into the specifics, let's cover a few stats. We're going to cover ramp, card draw, one-to-one removal, and board wipes, all of which this deck handles well above board. Starting off with ramp, there are 21 ramp cards in this deck, which might seem high until you realize that this deck's whole purpose is to make treasure tokens. So while, yes, you can use them for ramp, you're really trying to get 5 to get out your key pieces with Magda. Card draw is no slouch either, though. We are running 13 pieces of card draw, just enough to make sure you're getting the exact combo pieces you need. One-to-one removal, I tend to run a little higher than normal. We are running 9 pieces of one-to-one removal, as well as some protection for when we start comboing off. And as for board wipes, we are running 6. Now, 2 of those are dragons disguised as board wipes, and I think 2 to 3 of them are artifact removal, but they can double as all board removal. And I'll get into that with the key cards. So, Magda is a tutor on a stick, but what exactly are we tutoring for? Here are the key cards in the deck that I recommend you bring out. First high power artifact is Mycosynth Lattice, which turns every card into an artifact. Yes, that includes Magda, although by this point, if you're comboing off, you either have Magda as an artifact dwarf already, or you're using one of the very many artifact construct shapeshifters in the deck. Number 2 is Darksteel Forge, which makes all your artifacts indestructible. Combo that with Mycosynth Lattice, and all of a sudden, no one can blow up your shit. Another option is Krark Clan Ironworks, which turns all of those tapped artifacts you've been using into infinite colorless mana. As for dragons, we got a couple of good ones. There's a lot of good dragons in the deck, but these 3 are probably what I would recommend getting first. Hellkite Tyrant is a win con all in itself. Granted, it is a bit of a slower win con, although if you already have the artifacts necessary to win the game and you just happen to fire off Magda on someone else's end step right before yours, can be a surprise win. Terror of the Peaks is also another win con in itself. Being able to bring out all of your dragons and all of your shapeshifters, which count as dragons, tends to be enough to take any opponent's life points down to 0. And of course, Udvara Hellkite, which does combo nicely with Terror of the Peaks. But also, who's gonna say no to a board full of 6/6 dragons? So what is this combo that I keep mentioning? Now, first off, you have to have Magda out on the field, and you have to have Clock of Omens, which is an old school artifact, which reads tap 2 artifacts, untap target artifact. Then you either have Liquid Metal Torque, which turns one of your creatures, assuming it's a dwarf, into an artifact, or you have one of the 3 to 4 artifact construct shapeshifters. For the example, let's use Adaptive Automaton. So how it works is you tap Clock of Omens and whatever your artifact dwarf is, which will trigger Magda, which creates a treasure. You then untap your artifact creature. Now you have 2 untapped artifacts again, the treasure and the artifact dwarf. You then tap both of those, Magda triggers again, creates an artifact, you untap the artifact creature, and so on and so forth. You basically create infinite treasures, or technically there's no infinite treasures in, or any infinite number in Magic. Let's say 100,000. You can then sacrifice those at instant speed to Magda's ability, allowing you to tutor out any artifact or dragon you want in the deck. Usually that means game over. So Magda cares about dwarves, and honestly we need dwarves to make the combo work. But what dwarves are we actually running, considering they're not exactly the most supported race in Magic's history? Well, thankfully there are 4 artifact changelings that also count as dwarfs that we can utilize, not only to combo off if we choose to go down that route, but also just tend to either buff or be buffed by the amount of other dwarves we have. I'm talking about Adaptive Automaton, Bloodline Pretender, Metallic Mimic, and Universal Automaton. These 4 are some of the best dwarves you can possibly run in the deck. Beyond those, we get into some old school cards. I'm talking Dwarven Blood Boiler, which taps all your dwarves, creating treasures. Dwarven Recruiter, which is a tutor card for any of those artifact dwarf creatures or any other dwarf you might potentially need. Vault Robber, which when you have Magda out, creates 2 treasures, not 1. And last but not least, Stormkiln Artist, which creates treasures every time you cast an instant or sorcery. So we've covered the combo, we've covered the dwarves. What are some other key cards in this deck? I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Zorn, which is probably one of the better creatures you can have in this deck. Being able to double up your treasure production, no matter where it's coming from, is so good and helps you get to that necessary 5 to 10 artifacts you need to get your combo up and running. Yes, I do run Dockside Extortionist. It would be silly not to in this deck. I don't need to go into detail why this card is so good. There's a reason why its price keeps climbing. I honestly hope it gets a reprint. If you can afford this card, it's a must-have in pretty much every red deck, but especially this one. Reckless Endeavors is probably one of the most bonkers cards for this deck that's been printed in, well, since Kaldheim, when the deck actually first started. Being able to not only board wipe to clear room for Magda to come down, but also generate enough treasures to immediately start comboing off, or at the very least get some game-winning dragon, is just insane. Tower of the Magistrate might seem like a weird include in this list, especially considering it's so artifact heavy, but once you realize you can not only use it to target opponents' creatures that might be Voltroning off, but also your own creatures once you have Mycosynth Lattice down to give them unblockable, it becomes insane. This is a card that I feel like should see so much more play, especially in artifacts matters decks. I just don't get it. It's such a good card. And last but not least, we have Cryptic Gateway. Now this is a bit more of a convoluted and expensive Aether Vial, but it does everything we want. It not only taps down dwarves to create treasure tokens, but it gets us more creatures out on the battlefield quick. Now this is a bit of a pet card, I'll admit, but it's always fun to use whenever it goes off, and honestly, I always love playing cards from Onslaught block because that's right about when I started playing. Alright guys, that's going to do it. I might do a follow-up video once the Lord of the Rings set comes out, assuming there's enough new cards in that set and over the last year to make an update video. If there's any cards you think I should add, make sure to comment them down below. The full deck list is also in the links below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.